let's look at a couple of examples based on the material from Chapter 1. So we have a local company that has a staff of 4 workers, and they each work 8 hours per day, and they're able to produce 80 units per day. The payroll cost for those 4 employees is $600 per day, plus there's an overhead cost of $400 per day for the facility. So let's answer a couple questions based off this data. And so what is their labor productivity? And so we're going to provide the answer in units per hour. So remember that from our thing, our productivity is going to be the units produced divided by the labor hours used. Yeah, I was putting that U in there for labor. I used to read a lot of books from the UK apparently when I was a kid. It screwed up some of my spelling. So our productivity, we're just going to write the equation now, is just going to be the units produced divided by the labor hours used. Okay, so we have a staff of 4 workers, and they work 8 hours a day, and they're able to produce 80 units per day. So we can put that here. So we've got workers, since we'll use this later, hours per day, and then units per day. So we have 4 workers, they each work 8 hours per day, and they produce 80 units per day. Okay, so units produced. We're going to produce 80 units per day. Labor hours used. So to get those 80 units per day, we have our number of workers times the amount of hours that they spend. And so that productivity is going to be 2.5. Now the units for that, we'll put it right here, is units per labor hour. And so the productivity is 2.5 units per labor hour. And we'll just, I don't want to make that red. We'll shade that with just a green so we know that's our answer. So what is their multi-factor productivity? And so how is multi-factor productivity different than our regular productivity? Well, then our productivity is going to be the output divided by labor plus material plus energy plus capital. So we've got another couple things. So the payroll cost is going to be $600 per day, and we'll change that to accounting. And then we have the overhead is going to be $400 per day. And so let's take a look at it. So now our multi-factor productivity, and I'll just abbreviate it, MF for multi-factor productivity. And so we have the output. Sorry, I was going to cough there. So remember, our multi-factor productivity is output divided by labor plus material plus energy plus capital. Now typically all that stuff is expressed in dollars. We're not going to have the output in dollars because we're going to have it in units, but we can do the productivity based on units per cost. And so we have our units produced, which is going to be 80. And then we're going to end up dividing it by our labor, 400, plus we're going to add to that our material, which we do not have information on material. We do not have it on energy or capital, but we do have our overhead costs. And so what we're looking at our multi-factor productivity is we're looking at about 8 cents per unit. Per unit. Okay, so the company is considering adding 2 more employees, and so they anticipate the new daily production is going to be 144 units. So what's the new labor productivity? And so this is where we'll just take all of the stuff, Control C, copy it down to here. Now the numbers are all going to be wrong because when I copy and pasted it, it still indexed everything. So notice my units produced and labor hours are just the same, but units produced, it's pulling from over here because we copied and pasted down. So what we're going to do is we'll change things here, and so we'll say new units, it's going to be 144, and then labor hours, we will have workers, because now we added 2, so that's going to be 6. So the labor hours used, once again, it's using the equation that I copied down, which is why we have to change it. So I want to keep the workers, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here and go hours per day. This is one of the reasons that I like to use range names too, because then you can see in the equation exactly what it is. I mean, it's easy enough now to see H5 times H26, look at the colors, but when it gets a lot bigger, it's handy to have those range names. So we're going to use 48 labor hours now instead of 32, and the units produced, we'll just say, is that 144. So our productivity is going to be 3 units per labor hour. So what is the change in productivity? So what we'll do is we'll go equals, and then we want to know the difference between the new productivity and the old, and then we're basing it off of the original number. This will give us the percentage change from that number, and so we are looking at, and we'll change that into percentage to make it easier to look at, we're looking at a 20% increase in productivity by adding those 2 employees. Because now, because this is all based on per unit of labor hour, and this is based on unit per labor hour, so we can compare the 2 of them together. And so if you think about it, since everything's based on the number of units per labor hour, we're getting an extra half a unit more per labor hour than we were before. So we've increased the productivity. Well, let's look at, I don't have it in here, but let's look at what the new multi-factor productivity would be based on the information that we have. And so what we're going to end up doing is we're going to go and we are going to look at, once again, the units produced, and then we're going to divide it by our payroll and our overhead. We're going to assume, let's assume the overhead doesn't change because we're still going to use the same amount of lights and heating and cooling and all that. And payroll, we're just going to assume that we're going to do a straight 50% increase because we've increased the amount of employees by 50%. So we'll just say multiply it by 1.5 to give us a 50% increase in the number, in the amount of payroll. And so we can see our multi-factor productivity is 11 cents per unit. So we're being more productive, but it is costing us a little bit more per unit. Now, we have a lot of data that isn't in there, so this is just a look at how we're putting things together. There's more stuff that's going on, but that's just another quick way of looking at things.